A very good afternoon. It's Osho with Kiangwali News. Today I'm recording live here at the University of Scranton. Um, we're going to be covering the entire news of what happened at the conference that was held in Kitchener, Ontario, in Canada. The conference was all about trying to unite refugees from various parts of the United States, Canada, and also the Xinjiang region of in the areas around Europe. This idea was introduced by Daniel Gashumba Mukwezi, who is also the former Secretary General of Corporates International. And he had traveled around all these places. He's been in the US, in various states. He's been in Canada. He's visited different places in Canada. He's gone to Xinjiang and actually where his father lives. And he has a very good coverage of what the refugee life looks like in all these places. And he came up with this beautiful idea of thinking of uniting these families together, trying to come up with a committee of people that would help address some of the concerns that the community is facing. Looking at what was the coverage, we look at the idea being presented by him, Mukwezi, and also the acceptance of Pamoja kwa Maendeleo, which is a very small refugee group for those that live in Kitchener. And it's all about trying to address their own concerns. But they looked at what Gashumba had presented to them and said, you know what, we can actually help welcome those that will come in, and we'll have a conference here at our local church. And that's how the story was. Among other things, we'll look at the reason for the conference being some of the concerns the refugees had. Then also have individuals present at the meeting embrace the idea of each offering suggestions on how best to do it. However, this was put on hold after a young man, only identified as Alexei, who was also in the group, questioned on what the idea, questioned on what strategy the idea would embrace to make sure what was discussed became fruitful. However, this wasn't, the meeting that was planned for 2 days shrunk to one day session that ended without a big achievement. And this was because some of those that were scheduled to travel to Canada for the same conference did not turn up after they heard that Mr. Mukwezi was not going to show up for document reasons. In a text, he confirmed he wasn't traveling to Canada because he had document issues that had delayed, and he could have his flight rescheduled. Among other things, Alexei and other young leaders asked what the role of the pastors and refugee families, what the role of the pastors and why refugee families are highly becoming victims of crime in places they live. The conference of about 19 persons comprised of members of refugee communities as far as Tucson, Arizona. The musicians, comedians, pastors, and elders of the community were all present. We also, look at the elders questioning and sympathizing with what was happening to refugees from former Kivu region. And we also look at what Mrs. Mbanza, the wife of a pastor from Quebec, said. She advised women not to be ignorant of African culture, citing that some women no longer have time for their families due to work schedules, citing that this shouldn't be an excuse even when they have a busy work schedule. She said people have to get married and be patient. Her husband, Pastor Mbanza, later had a brief economic session to teach those present to have a plan for saving and also for their household income. He emphasized that refugee families have to be vigilant, especially on how they spend their money. In this same meeting, Alexei disagreed with the idea of creating creating a committee, and that Congolese committees don't work, and instead suggested that a council of committees have of committed individuals could be established without official titles. He said, "We talk too much and failed to implement." As the meeting wrapped up, Pastor Gakuru clarified that the reason for the meeting was to lay a foundation for the idea of uniting and addressing refugee concerns. He said, quote, "We forget that we are refugees when we reach here." He said, adding that if you went to a police station asking for refugee cases and ended up in Rwanda. Briefly, that's a very short story of what exactly happened, and of course a lot more was discussed, but at the end of the meeting it wasn't successful due to the fact that many of those that attended had questions on what strategy would work best to address these issues that had already been realized in the discussions, and also in some of the stories that people told in the conference. We're also looking forward to covering a lot more stories about refugees in the future, but for now I stay Ushu here in Scranton for Kengwali News. Thank you.
Yene yagamba nti omusajja takaaba maziga.